Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of my Cedar Point Recreation Park. In the last episode we worked on the station building for Blue Streak, and I felt like it was appropriate to stick around there and build the station for Raptor. Feels like these rides go together very nicely, so made sense to continue over here. As usual, a couple problems with Raptor. Nothing we couldn't solve with a little bit of creativity. The placement of the station is one of the biggest problems I have with this so far. We don't have a lot of room for the queue and exit to go where they're supposed to go, so I don't have them quite lined up correctly. But I was able to get something that works kind of okay. The exit path goes over the queue in kind of a weird place, but I feel like the station is going to cover it up enough that it hopefully won't be a big issue. The main problem we have here is the placement of the last helix on the ride. There wasn't enough room to put it anywhere but over top of the queue, which really is unfortunate because I don't like having the track going over the queue. Looks real awkward. But unfortunately there just wasn't any room for it to go anywhere else. So we're just going to have to stick with it. Regardless, I think the queue looks pretty good. The general shape is there. I closed off some of the queue because it was already way too long, which you normally see on Raptor these days anyway. But you get that nice big slab of pavement look, which is pretty realistic and I quite like it. One nice thing about Raptor is that the station design lends itself particularly well to RCT. It has a kind of industrial sheet metal sort of look to it. Even with all the wild colors, which actually match pretty well with RCT's colors. So you can get something that looks pretty realistic compared to the real thing. And I quite like the way mine turned out. You throw enough steel walls and boxy supports for the paths and things like that, and it winds up looking pretty good. This is definitely the kind of ride where our wooden coaster and car ride track for roofs particularly matches well, and I quite like the way it turned out here. Although things are still a little bit cramped with stuff like the transfer track, there isn't quite enough room to get it looking totally functional, especially with all the supports and things that are required, but I think what we have here turned out pretty alright. Speaking of supports, we also did some considerable custom support work on this ride. One thing that RCT doesn't do particularly well compared to games like Parkitect is supports for B&M style coasters specifically. They like to have these big angular supports on their lift hills, and it's just really not that feasible to do them in RCT and have them look decent. I've been ignoring them so far on Valraven and Gatekeeper, and I don't know how much it's going to be feasible to do with Raptor as well. I did do a little bit of custom support work on the chain lift, and I would like to give yet another shout out to Borke and Kazulius' Raptor recreation that they did last year. I stole a little bit of the design for the chain lift supports from their plot because it just looked so darn good. Mine isn't quite an exact replica. I didn't put as many crossbeams in because the real track supports don't have that many crossbeams in them. And I want to try to keep it more realistic where I can. But those skyscraper corner filler pieces always are so flexible and really can do a lot for these kinds of custom supports. As you see me use them for track footers before. It's a shame we can't make them green here to match the track color, but that's a concession that I'm kind of okay with. But anyway, I'm fairly happy with the way that this overall build turned out. There's a lot of elements on the Raptor plot that work very well for RCT. Such as the little bit of roof that goes over part of the queue, and the roof that goes over the walkway underneath the track to take you to Valraven. Little bits like that I think worked out really well. So I'm pretty happy with the way this build went. As always, there's still a little bit of empty space here and there where we're going to need to add some foliage and backlot stuff. But the little bits that we've added in so far I think are really helping this area look nice, so I'm pretty happy with how things are going. It's just a matter of taking the time and getting those little details in. I spent a little bit of extra time on this one compared to some of our other stations. I think this one took around 2.5 hours, where usually I'm spending 1.5 to 2 hours on each of these stations. I did put in a little bit of extra outside details as well, that probably is part of the reason. But of course, as usual, it just goes to show that putting in the effort is going to get us some good looking results. So, the further we get, the better things are looking, and I'm pretty pleased so far. One thing I'm not particularly pleased about is that I discovered yet another missing building. Back when we were doing Top Thrill Dragster, I pointed out there was a building I missed that caused a little bit of issues with layout on that part of the midway. And there was another one here by Raptor as well. There's a building by the vertical loop that's got an apparel shop and some food stalls. And for some reason, I just completely missed it. And in this particular case, there really isn't quite enough room for it. It's got to jut out onto the midway a little bit, as it does in real life, but it also has some of the track going directly over top of the building, which is no good, because that's definitely not how it should be in real life. I don't think there's much we can do about it at this point. I don't think it's possible to really shift the track back anymore. There's a little bit of room, but I don't think it's possible to actually make the track do that and have it still look good. So I think we're just going to have to stick with this and just take the loss here, knowing that there's a building that didn't quite fit in where it's supposed to go. But yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I'd really need to go through and see if there's any other ones I missed, because if I did miss any more of them, I don't want them to wind up like this where it's going to be a problem. So I need to make sure I actually go ahead and do that this time, instead of saying I'm going to do it and then not doing it. But could have been a lot worse. I think what we wound up with still looks pretty okay. Anyway, I think that about does it for today. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and as always, if you got any comments or suggestions, please let me know. Thanks for watching.